All right. Hey there, everybody. Thanks so much for joining for the Meat and Poultry HACCP course. If somebody wanted to ping me and let me know you can hear me, that would be amazing. I'm testing out a new microphone. Because if any of you were on some of my Facebook Lives, I guess last week, I had a massive microphone fail. So we'll wait for a minute. I pinged everybody in the chat box, and yes, you can hear me. You are amazing people. Thank you so much. There you go. Feel free to talk to everybody in the chat box, but only if you say nice things about your teacher. All right, so welcome back to Meat and Poultry HACCP, day 2. I want to let everybody know that we are getting those emails under control. We have a new email system. We're all about new technology around here, and most of the time it works, and some of the times it doesn't. So, so anyway, I will be popping back and forth to the chat box, and so, but let's get started. Today we are going to be covering a lot of really good stuff. And everybody's been sending in their homework, so that's really amazing. I love getting to know everybody, all my students. That's so much fun. I love where everybody's from. That's great. And I love how much work we're going to do together. So let's just dive right on into Meat and Poultry HACCP. So today we are going to do a deep dive into programs-based food safety, because if you don't get your programs right, you don't get anything else right either. Okay, so remember, this is kind of the middle of our diagram. And for those of you who are part of the power group and who are doing this as part of the membership, I have a whole explanation of how we go about doing this. So that's a whole video on the membership site. If you'd like to go take a look at that, I highly recommend going and doing that. And for those of you who want to know about the power group, by all means ask me questions, because it's pretty awesome. All right, so today we are really diving into what prerequisite programs are, why they are important, and we're going to do a deep dive into a couple of prerequisite programs that I find really important, so that you can get an idea of what the work actually is. Okay, so what do these prerequisite programs do? The most important thing that prerequisite programs do, okay, is that they make hazards not reasonably likely to occur. If hazards are not reasonably likely to occur, then we don't have to control for them, okay? And that means something. The less you actually have to control for stuff, the fewer pieces of paper you're going to have that are as heavily regulated, okay? Prerequisite programs don't actually get you out of doing paperwork most of the time, but they get you out of having your food be suspected of being adulterated. So if the USDA, if you screw up on a critical control point, okay, your food is suspected of being adulterated. If you screw up on an SOP, that's not axiomatic. It doesn't always logically follow that yours is adulterated the way that it would if you mess up a critical control point. And this will become more clear as the class goes on, okay? And I want to make sure that you understand that prerequisite programs have different component parts. And so here on the screen, we talk about a chemical hygiene plan or a program. There are, one of the things that makes Meat and Poultry HACCP confusing is that there are ways we talk about things that are, they're not parallel. You know, everybody talks about chemical hygiene planning because that's the way the industrial hygienists call it. And they're the ones that usually work in this space. But as meat producers, you absolutely have to have a chemical hygiene plan because you're using chemicals in your facility. And how that chemical is defined can be up to your state. So I urge you to understand what your state says about chemicals and chemical hygiene and chemical programming and things like that. Because here in the state of Maine, where I am, the Maine pesticide law is written such that you could be using a 22 to, like shoot deer on your property, which I have clients who do. And that's a pest control program, and you need a pesticide applicator's license to do that. Does it make any sense? No. I didn't write the law, which is what I end up saying to a lot of people. But so be aware that there are sometimes programs that we put out there that may not be called programs, but they really are prerequisite programs. And they're made up of standard operating procedures. They're made up of the logs, all right? But they'll probably also have other things associated with them that shows that these prerequisite programs are useful in controlling food safety or in controlling worker safety, like we have in a chemical hygiene plan. So a chemical hygiene plan always has SDS sheets with it, or MSDS sheets, and you have to have training. We include all of that as part of the food safety plan, because if I didn't, I don't think my clients would actually do it. And it also protects the USDA, and they like it when they know you're working to protect them too, because they are in your plant and they are around your chemicals. It would behoove you to make them aware. I mean, I don't think you can make them go through your chemical hygiene planning and training, but they might. And it would behoove you to say, hey, we have a chemical hygiene plan. Because you're in our plant, you need to be safe at our plant. And if something happens, here are the MSDSs, here's the eye wash station, and just, have them trained on that, whether they sign in or not. They get training as part of their job, but them knowing where the MSDS sheets are in your plant would also be super helpful for them, and they love that kind of stuff. Okay, so again, we saw this slide last time, but programs-based food safety conserves resources and minimizes waste, and that's how we run efficient plants. Y'all, I am all about creating wealth and community with smallholder food production, and we do that through efficiency. And we do it through a different kind of efficiency than commodity ag does. We don't do it through line speed efficiency. We do it through efficiency in how we decide and how we write down our decisions, we act on our decisions, and we evaluate and make it better as we go on. That's how we create wealth and community, and that's how we create efficiency in our systems, okay? If you want to know more about efficiency in systems, for those of you who don't know, I have a podcast, the Smallholder Food Business Development Institute podcast, and we're on Stitcher and iTunes and a whole bunch of other podcast platforms, like 10 other podcast platforms. And I talk about efficiency in episode 22, lean wastes. So it's the lean waste of food manufacturing. Super good episode, all about conserving resources and minimizing waste. Okay, so what are the components of a program? The components of a program are just like I said, they're the standard operating procedures, the logs, and probably the registers. If you are going for SQF, you're going to need registers of your logs, okay? Because it's part of your document controlling program. Registers are good for a whole number of reasons as you get more and more documentation, because it lets you know where the documentation is. Okay, because it's not, it's like not always clear. I have somebody going through a recall right now, and we have a document registered where we know that this happens to be an FDA recall, what documents the FDA has taken, so that we can understand where all our information is. That's what a register does, okay? The other thing that I want to let you know about programs-based food safety is that these standard operating procedures, we don't just write them because the USDA wants to see them. So the 4 steps of running a super efficient plant are, like I said, we decide what we're going to do and we write it down, and then we do it, and then we evaluate it. Do you know what an SOP does? decides what you're going to do. It's a written documentation of it. It tells you how to execute it. And then we have steps to verify that you did it correctly. Okay. So with an SOP and logs, you are constraining yourself. And that is a beautiful thing. Embrace the constraint of writing SOPs really well and only doing what your SOPs say. Okay. So then how do we create an SOP? This is how we do it. Okay. You're going to make a template. All right, so we have a template SOP. We have template SOPs for all of our SOPs. I highly recommend keeping it online. I'm a big fan of a Google back office to do this. It seems the easiest way to be doing this. Train people to use the template every time and really only have a couple of people actually writing the SOPs. All right. And then what you're going to want to do, and what I recommend doing, especially if you're using a Google document to do this, is Google has a voice dictation feature. What I would recommend before you put this stuff in your template is to take your phone, okay, especially if you have an Android phone, open up Google Documents and walk out to your floor or to wherever it is the procedure is going on and dictate into your phone what is happening. Okay. And if you use the voice recording and say, okay, so first we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, you're going to watch it in real time, and your SOP is going to be way more accurate. Now you're going to have to go back and edit it so that it like reads normally, but you'll have all of the steps because you will have recorded it watching it, and that's amazing. Okay, so you're going to want to describe the procedure. You're going to want to describe how frequently you do things. So most SOPs are time constrained. You know, a receiving SOP is executed on receipt of product, right? So figure out what the time constraint is of when you do things in your SOP. It's imperative that all SOPs have somebody assigned responsibility for making sure the SOP is in place, for making sure that the SOP is trained on, and for making sure that the SOP is done. But it is also the responsibility of the people who have to actually execute the SOP to execute according to SOP. So we write that responsibility into the SOP itself, okay? And then we train on it because your workers and employees, they don't know what to do unless you've told them. They can't guess. And when we constrain to the SOP, that actually frees everybody's mind up in a pretty beautiful way. Okay, so then the question is, what are the actions taken if the SOP isn't done correctly? All right, these are what we call corrective actions and preventative actions. And I promise you, if you're running your plant well, most of the things that are going to go wrong in your plant are not going to go wrong in your HACCP plan. All right, they are going to go wrong in your standard operating procedures, or they're going to be so far outside the realm of like nobody could have predicted. But you'll probably have an SOP to come in and help you manage the process, even if it's only your corrective actions and preventative actions SOP, okay? So the reason you want to have corrective actions in your SOP is because most things that are going to go wrong are going to go wrong within the context of the SOP. Somebody's not going to clean something. Somebody's not going to log something. Somebody's not going to sign in on the visitor log. None of that stuff is in your HACCP. It's all in your SOPs, okay? What happens if you have an unexpected outcome? This happens in testing SOPs all the time. Okay, so again, running a recall, somebody's got a listeria positive, that was an unexpected outcome, now we have to do corrective actions. What do you do in case things are going wrong? It is of supreme importance in your listeria control SOP, okay, that you write out what happens if you have a positive on a food contact surface, on a high-risk non-food contact surface, and on a product. Those are 3 different things according to the USDA. And I don't know when they decided on that, but that happened with I think that happened with a client last year, and I had to update my listeria control SOP. But you got to say what you're exactly going to do if you have a listeria positive, because of course your listeria control SOP is all about having listeria negatives. All right, so make sure it has what do you do for food contact surface positive, high risk non-food contact surface positive, and product positive. And if you want to be really, really buttoned up, as we say in the military, what happens for a positive in a non-food contact surface, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Next time we're going to be doing the actual hazards themselves where I cover listeria, so we'll talk about listeria then, okay? Next thing that that we write into our SOP is how are the records stored, okay? USDA has very strict guidelines on how records are stored. For the first 6 months, they have to be in your facility, all right, and they have to be immediately available to the inspector. After 6 months, they can be stored off-site, okay? And if they're stored off-site, they have to be available within 24 hours, I'm pretty sure, but it might be 48. I don't know. I have it written down and I go look every time I need it. So, but anyway, they have to be available, okay? But they don't all have to be stored on-site. If you are doing electronic record storage, there are specific guidelines around electronic records storage. And what I can do is I'll post a comment in the membership site, and I'll let you guys know what those records requirements are. Okay, so that's how to create an SOP. This is what an SOP kind of looks like. So if you guys are already a client, this will look really familiar because this is how we write everything. Okay, the scope of your SOP is why in real English you're writing this SOP. Okay, most SOPs that I read are written at a high undergraduate level to a master's degree. You should probably count how many people in your organization have an undergraduate degree, let alone a master's degree, who are actually executing your SOPs. Okay. So there are one of the most fun things I do with my clients when I'm doing internal audits is I send their SOPs through a reading analyzer, and it tells me what grade level it's written to. And we're actually doing a project at my company this summer where we're upgrading all our templates, having gone through a reading analyzer. So I have an intern. Sounds like a great intern project, right? So we'll be upgrading all of our SOPs this summer to be at an 8th grade reading level. 6th grade if we can get there, but an 8th grade reading level at a minimum, okay? So the purpose is to what requirement you are writing this. So you are probably writing this SOP to a requirement in the Federal Meat and Poultry Products Act. So we put that number right there. If you are going for SQF, we put the SQF element, we call them, or the BRC element in the purpose. Requirements are everything that you need to execute that SOP besides a pen and paper and a brain, okay? So if it's a sanitation SOP, you need scrub brushes and soap and sanitizer and scrubbies and personal protective equipment, all right? And responsibilities, I've already talked about. Responsibilities is who's responsible for this SOP. Those are the people who have to sign at the top and the bottom, okay? So you'll see SOPs have to be countersigned if you are doing SQF, and they are signed for implemented as company policy. All right, that's the signature at the bottom of the SOP, and then signed in at the top that this is our current version of this SOP. This is what we are doing, and I am taking responsibility for it. That's the signatory up at the top, okay? You'll notice this looks a lot like the SOP that we did for the specifications. That's on purpose. All our documentation looks the same. Verification and validation. Oh, wait, no, storage. There's the storage. So it is within 48 hours. So keep your documents stored, again, buy yourself a good filing cabinet. Verification and validation. Verification asks us, are you doing what you said you were going to do? Okay. And validation says, is it helpful? There are some SOPs that we can validate. We can't validate all of them. But there's a lot that we can do to make sure that your SOPs are actually being helpful. Corrective action programs. Here at Jericho Food Safety, we write corrective actions into every SOP because it's usually the SOP going wrong. All right, and so we write in corrective actions so that they make sense. All right, and so there's a great question. How do we determine what needs an SOP and what doesn't? If you are doing something over and over and over again, it probably needs an SOP. Okay. So I have had in USDA plants SOPs for how to answer the phone. And these usually get implemented during a recall. So the trick around the SOPs is to not write them so that you write yourself into a corner, and so that they are too prescriptive. And I have been in plants where they have too many SOPs and nobody pays attention to them because there's so many of them and they all kind of go at cross purposes. And nobody knows where to look. And so if you have thousands of SOPs, I don't want to say thousands, but if you have more than 100 SOPs and nobody's paying attention to them, you have too many SOPs and you need to cut back. I find for most SQF facilities, they probably need between 4 and 5 dozen SOPs to cover all the elements. For just a USDA granted facility, I'd be surprised if they need 3 dozen. If you find yourself doing something over and over and you keep having to retrain on it, you need an SOP for it. Okay? The only SOPs that are legally required by the USDA are your sanitation standard operating procedures. Everything else they call like an allergen control plan, a listeria control plan, and like a recall plan and things like that. So they don't consider those SOPs. And for those who need to know, SQF stands for Safe Quality Food. It is the ISO certification for food. So if you think about ISO 9001, this is ISO 22000, and it's what we use in our food facilities. All right, so then the other thing I put in my SOPs is what documents did we generate by this SOP? Because I'm an auditor, and when I know what documents you're generating, I know that's one of the ways I know the SOP was written. If your SOP doesn't generate any documents, I'd be surprised if you need it. If it's just a policy that you have to have written down, I can maybe, but SOPs should have procedures that create data. Data creates information in your system. Information must be taken to actionable knowledge. That's how you create an efficient plant. Okay, and so really understand why you're writing the SOP, and that'll help you constrict the number of SOPs. Okay, I mean, believe me, I'm from the Army. If you can do it, we have a manual for that. You know, and we can actually go overboard, but if you constrain it, I mean, more than 100, you definitely don't need. And so it's between 100 and 36. How about that? Okay. So your procedure, like I said, is how you actually do it. All right. And then you put in your signatory approval. Then at the very, very end, we have this implementation and revision history. So your implementation and revision history, you got to go back and look at these things. Okay. Remember, the process of writing is rewriting. You're not going to get this right on the first time. I still meet with my very first customer every year to go over her SOPs and her HACCP plan. We spend half a morning doing it. We have a delightful time, and she pays me in hamburger. It's great. So we look at these things every year, or if there is a problem, we go back and revise them, and then we just keep track of that in the SOP itself. Okay. All right, so what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to go to current good manufacturing practices and cut and paste the language, because that doesn't work. Nobody's going to understand it. I mean, hell, I got a doctorate and I barely understand it. Everybody gets to follow the SOPs. This is super important when it comes to like personal protective equipment, washing your hands and things like that. I do see general managers walking through floors not looking like everybody else. And that's not great for morale. All right. We review them. We revise them as we need. They are all signed and dated, and those dates are within the last 365 days. And you actually use them, and you know that you're using them correctly. Okay. So in our power group, one of the things that we do is every month we have an SOP that we review. And in the first week of the month, we take it out and see if it's right. And in the third week of the month, we go and see if we're doing what we said we were doing. That's the kind of stuff you got to do. Are you doing what you said you were doing? If not, change the SOP, because I see on both the USDA side of the house and in a third-party audit, people get into more hot water when they have something written down that they don't do. They don't, I mean, by and large, all y'all are doing the right actions for food safety. But if you have something else written down, that's where the problem is. And that's the finding on the audit. The finding on the audit is you said you were going to write down lot numbers on the bill of lading, and you're actually writing lot numbers down on your receiving log. That's a real life example. And I know it sounds super nitpicky, but it's much better to have a good process that you write to rather than to take a perfect process and pretend you do it. Okay, so that's what we need around SQF best practice or SOP best practices. Okay, so you're going to have a whole set of prerequisite programs. All of these are probably going to be part of an SOP that's going to have logs. All right, so your facilities, I have a facilities checklist that I'm happy to give you. Episode 31 on the podcast covers facilities, but I'll put the facilities audit in the membership site. You should have SOPs on your production, how you do your production and how you do your equipment if you're going for an SQF audit. Okay, you need to, they will audit how do you operate this machinery. Okay, how do you put together and break down this piece of equipment? All right, master cleaning is all the things you don't clean every day. Chemical control we've gone through. USDA is going to want to see your pest control plan, and you're going to have a pest control company for you to get a grant of inspection. And then everything else is, I think, probably fairly self-explanatory. I want to talk about calibration a little bit because this comes in later when we do actual when we do the critical control points and critical limits. Calibration is of supreme importance, and the USDA always looks at it. Your equipment is calibrated by the factory, and you calibration or accuracy check it. Those processes have to be written down. And again, if you're going for an SQF audit, all of that logging equipment, like your thermometers and your humidistats and all that sort of stuff, they have to be uniquely identified, and you do all of that in your calibration SOP. Okay, I highly recommend a customer complaint process. USDA really, really likes to see that. An environmental monitoring SOP, that's what you do to, that's what you write up the various ways you keep track of yeasts and molds and ATP testing and listeria and all that sort of stuff. So it's everything that's not product testing, okay? And again, you gotta do what works in your facility, but these are some fairly common ones that you guys are gonna have in your facility. Okay, so you guys are gonna write an SOP. And if you're part of the power group, please don't send me an SOP that I wrote. Write one yourself. Go find something, all right, do the process and send it to training@DirigoFoodSafety.com. We want to see what you come up with. I have been delighted and surprised by some of my students that how good at writing SOPs they are, and they never knew they were good at writing SOPs. And it doesn't have to be something really, really big. Write an SOP that somebody would find really useful. Write the SOP that you wish you had the first day you started work. That's a useful SOP to write. Okay, so we look forward to seeing your homework. All right, so remember, these prereq programs are so important because they make hazards not reasonably likely to occur. If hazards are not reasonably likely to occur, we don't have to control for them. Most of you will notice that I repeat myself a lot, and that's because these are the concepts I really, really need you to take home from this training. Okay, so auditing and continuous process improvement. This is, that part of that four-step process that we have where we decide what we're going to do and we write it down. That's your SOP. Then we actually execute it. That's your procedure. And then that fourth step is, did I do what I said I was going to do? That's verification. That's self-coaching on the process and how you're showing up to it. We go through it, we revise it, and we make sure that your SOPs are furthering the process of your HACCP and food safety planning, because if they're not, do we really need them? You know, I mean, I work with a client and I love him to death, and he's a former submariner, and he got an SOP for everything. And I swear I do his internal audits, and I am constantly telling him to narrow down the number of SOPs because nobody can keep track of that many. And so, and they're not actually, they actually become a hindrance to the food safety planning process because they miss the forest for the trees, okay? It's a delicate balance, and I know you guys can do it. All right, so you have to go in and you have to say, are we doing what we said we were doing, and is it helpful? Are we doing the monitoring that we said we were doing? Are we keeping the records we say we're keeping? So a lot of times, like when I have a listeria problem, listeria is always a problem with cleaning, and I ask for the cleaning records and the sanitation SOPs, and I read them, and I'm like, okay, where's this record? And they're like, what are you talking about, Dr. P? That's how I know we have problems, okay? And so understand what records you have, what they mean, and are they kept well, okay? And then get an independent audit. You know, you don't have to get an SQF audit. You don't, you can just have a regular third-party HACCP audit. They can be very, very useful in your USDA process. I have some good people that I work with. I don't really do audits anymore because I'm doing much more of the coaching and consulting and training side of the house. But I'd be happy to connect you with a third-party auditor if you'd like. Okay, so this is the take home, okay? I promise everything else is easy if you get your prerequisite programs down, because there will be so many fewer hazards that you actually have to control. The other thing I want to emphasize is we don't write our prerequisite programs into our HACCP plan other than to refer to them. So we don't write the SOP in the HACCP plan. I see a ton of HACCP plans where it says listeria doesn't happen because we clean all of these food contact surfaces. We never put that in the HACCP plan, okay? So there'll be more about that when we're writing critical limits. All right, so let's dive into a couple of prerequisite programs so that you guys know some good practices around these. So one of the most important ones is your approved supplier program. Because remember, I asked you who are your suppliers, and that's because there's so much of what you do that relies on good raw ingredients coming into the facility. Okay, so you have a couple of types of suppliers. You have raw materials, so that's all the meat. Okay, if you run a vertically integrated operation, my recommendation is that you at least mentally silo your business. Okay, where one part of the business receives from another part of the business. So if you do both slaughter and raw ground and raw not ground, your fabrication receives from your slaughter. If you do value-added processing, your value-added processing receives from your fabrication. Okay, this actually makes the HACCP planning a whole lot easier because then you don't have one gigantic HACCP plan that like covers everything that happens to the steer from, you know, the minute it sets foot out your door to when it goes out is pepperoni. All right, so you have raw materials, you have packaging, services suppliers. I'm a services supplier, so if I come to your facility or if you use me, there should be a approval process for approving me as a supplier, right? You also have chemical suppliers that you should approve. Your pest control is a supplier that you should approve. All right, so there are lots of different things. Like anybody who doesn't work for you, who's coming to your facility, probably a supplier. Maybe not the UPS man, but you get what I mean. All right, so suppliers help you run your business well. I mean, you guys supply people and your goal is to help them run the business well, right? We're building wealth in community, and that's how we do it, by being in service to other people. And so we have to like ask yourselves, and I have this conversation all the time. If people are difficult to work with and they don't deliver on time, they're not a good supplier. If they send you 1,000 pounds of stuff and they were supposed to send you 2,000 pounds of stuff, they're not a good supplier. You don't have to work with them. Okay, so don't dive so far into here. You lose the idea that your supplier is supposed to help you run your business better. Okay, so always ask that question. Do you like working with them? Are these pleasant people? Work should be fun. let's have some fun and make sure the people we work with are fun to work with, and that includes our suppliers. Okay. The USDA is very interested in knowing if you have allergens that you buy from them. This is especially important if you use spice mixtures, because spice mixtures often have anti-caking agents in them. Anti-caking agents are often allergens. If you use binders in your sausages and your salumis, those are often allergens. And for reasons that escape me, these spices suppliers change their recipes all the time. And it is to the point where my preference for my clients, if they are buying premixed spices, is to do supplier approval every quarter, so every 3 months with their suppliers, because things can change really, really fast. All right. So if that's, you know, like something that happens to you and you buy premixed spices, I would look at your spices suppliers every quarter. Other people you don't have to look at every quarter. You know, I mean, you're going to get a letter of guarantee from your slaughterhouse or whatever, and that suffices for the USDA. That does not suffice for a third-party audit. Okay, a letter of guarantee is worth the paper that it is written on. We have them for the USDA because the law requires it, but they are not particularly useful, and the lawyers really hate writing them. All right, then the next question is how risky is the product? All right, there are vastly different risks to your product. You know, if you're buying in beef trim, that's a pretty risky product. If you're buying in fresh produce to make chicken salad, also a very risky product. If you are buying in pork carcasses that you're turning into barbecue that you're serving hot, definitely less risky. Okay, so just take a minute, especially after we go through the hazards part of the course, to understand how risky your products are. All right. Okay. Sanitation. This one's a biggie. Okay. This one is the one that the USDA requires. They call it SOPs. It stands for Sanitation Standard Operating Procedure. If you don't do this right, you don't do anything else right. Okay. And it makes all sorts of hazards not reasonably likely to occur. So there are lots of different parts of an SSOP. Not all of these are required for everybody. But your pre-op SOP is 100% required for absolutely everybody. Your food contact surfaces must be cleaned at the start of your production day. I highly recommend you clean them at the end of your production day too, because they can tag you for leaving your place in an insanitary condition. And that means all your food contact surfaces. If you are not using a particular piece of equipment that day, no, you don't have to clean it, but I would be able to segregate it in some way or otherwise document that you're not using it. All right. If you are making a ready-to-eat food or another kind of high-risk food, I recommend operational cleaning at the 4-hour mark. This is especially important if you are grinding beef. Okay. Studies have shown that by the 4-hour mark, if you have a Shigatoxin E. coli problem, you will be able to clean your equipment and it won't get into the food. So that's why we stop at 4 hours. I recognize that's a pain in the neck, but do it for your lunch break. It is way better than a Shigatoxin E. coli recall. All right. After operations, we clean and sanitize immediately. And here's where I want to talk about cleaning crews. So people have cleaning crews, people have their production staff clean. There are pros and cons to all of those things. Okay. I work with people who the production staff basically finishes the day and wets everything down. And then the cleaning crew is kind of coming in right behind them. And that works out pretty well. There are some, I mean, you know, if you've been cutting meat for 8 hours a day, you don't want to spend another 4 hours cleaning up. All right. So a lot of people institute cleaning crews for that. The problem with cleaning crews is they don't care about your equipment and they don't know how it's used the same way the production people do. So it's a very, it's a complex conversation to have. One of the things that I will tell you that I have found that has been amazing for my clients is that once you have somebody on the production floor who knows what they're doing, if you promote them to what we call production sanitation. and you have somebody who understands the flow of the process, who understands the process itself, who is in charge of making sure the facility, like the processing rooms and stuff, stays reasonably tidy over the course of the day, and they're in charge of making sure like the 4-hour cleaning gets done and things like that, that's a position of pretty good responsibility. And it helps keep your facility and your equipment cleaner. And if you promote into that, it brings the sanitation conversation up to a whole new level. Because all of a sudden, the people who are keeping the facility clean aren't the ones working third shift. All right. Yes, you will have third shift sanitation, but the leaders of your sanitation conversation will be people who got promoted into that coming from production. It also really helps in cross-training. So something to think about. All right. So your master cleaning schedule, that's like I alluded to earlier, that's everything that isn't cleaned every day. So your master cleaning schedule is how you clean the pipes and how you clean the conduits and when you clean the bathroom, folks. And please don't clean the bathroom with the clothes that you do your production in. I don't say these things because I haven't seen them. All right. So master cleaning schedules are pretty important because you do have to clean the whole entire facility and make sure the whole entire facility is not like food safe, contact surface food safe, but clean and hygienic and not creating a harborage of pests. That's really what the USDA is looking for on that. Preventive maintenance is all about making sure your equipment doesn't fall into your food. The USDA expects to see preventive maintenance as part of their SSOP. So grinders, slicers, all that sort of stuff. I take that out and put it in its own preventive maintenance SOP. USDA considers personal hygiene as part of the SSOPs. Personal hygiene programming, wash your hands, sing happy birthday twice, wear your PPE. On a note of PPE, PPE stands for personal protective equipment. I do not believe in masks, and I barely believe in gloves. If you have gloves in your facility, it is to protect your workers from the food, not the other way around. Gloving is not a substitution for hand washing. Okay, most people use it as a substitution for hand washing, and they don't treat their gloves particularly well, and then the gloves fall into the food, and then you have a foreign body in the food. Okay, so that can be problematic. And then when it comes to masks, I see there's been this new trend in ready-to-eat foods where people are wearing masks, and they're wearing all their masks like below their nose, and all the bacteria is coming from breathing in and out of your nose. So I don't find those particularly helpful. And then plus, it's just more stuff on your floor that can cause a problem. So, all right, so cleaning, I get this all the time. Cleaning is the process of removing like the food you can see. That's cleaning. We break up proteins and fats and we use soap to clean. Cleaning, most people don't understand, requires contact time. So I trained in surgery, all right, and because for those of you who don't know, I'm a veterinarian, all right, and I know how to do surgery, even though I don't do it now. And when when you see on the shows and you see everybody like scrubbing up and that sort of thing, the truth is that most of this action is not doing anything except wearing our skin off. Most of that action, besides like cleaning out from under your fingernails and your nail beds and things like that, is to give you something to do to pass the time for the soap to work. Most soap has a contact time of between 7 and 12 minutes. If you are not keeping your soap on your equipment for 7 to 12 minutes, you are not cleaning effectively. All right. So my recommendation is that you either have your pump and you have a foam sprayer, or you have a bucket of soap and a scrub brush. Okay. And you foam everything up, or you scrub everything up, and you go back and you scrub it down. Okay. That process in most food production facilities takes at least 7 minutes. And then your soap has the right contact time. All right. Contact time is key. If you come to me with a listeria problem, I know it's a cleaning problem. Listeria is always a cleaning problem. It's not like any of the other bacteria. Listeria is always a problem with cleaning. Okay. So you got to clean your drains. Please clean your drains. That's where the listeria lives. What are some other problems I see in cleaning? You got to clean out every so often your catch pans on your condensers. Those can get really fun. I've seen mushrooms growing in those. That's awesome. Yeah, so 7 to 12 minutes. I have taken my phone. Okay, I was in a plant that was having listeria problem, USDA plant, making ready to eat ham salad or something, and they had a listeria problem, and I clocked them in at foaming up and scrubbing a tote at, I believe it was 38 seconds, and then they rinsed it off and they said we're good to go. And I was like, this is part of our problem. It wasn't the whole problem, but that's part of the problem. 7 minutes, clock it. That's a really good way to verify that your cleaning is doing what it's supposed to. All right, sanitizing is removing the bacteria and the things that you cannot see, okay? You cannot sanitize a dirty surface. Can you use bleach as a cleaner and a sanitizer? Yes, but you're gonna use a lot more bleach and water. Soap to clean, sanitizer to sanitize. I do not recommend quaternary ammonia for a couple of reasons, and not because of bacterial resistance. I don't recommend it because it's very bad for your workers' lungs. Okay, I've been working with a sanitarian. There's some research out there on the effects of quaternary ammonia on workers' lungs, and it is not good. All right, so there's no reason to rotate your sanitizers. Sanitizers work by mechanical action, and your bacteria cannot develop immunity to it. It just can't. They work by mechanically breaking up the bacterial cell wall. All right. Sanitizers don't work in the presence of food. So you got to get the food away. All right. Then after you sanitize, just leave everything there to dry. We don't rinse after sanitizing. All right. Here is an example of the clean and sanitize procedure that I do. So reassemble equipment without rinsing. So this is for a pre-op or operational SOP. Alrighty, so that's what it looks like. So sanitation checklist. This is what a lot of people refer to as their pre-op SOP. This isn't your pre-op SOP, this is your pre-op checklist. Does the USDA want to see it? Absolutely. Do you have to do it? Absolutely. This is the data that you create by executing your SOP. This isn't the SOP itself. Okay. ATP swabbing. I know some of you guys are doing ATP swabbing. I highly recommend it. If you are doing ready to eat foods, the thing you have to ATP swab is your slicer. All right. You have to make sure that your ATP swabs, that you understand what information your ATP swabs are giving you. That's why we do 90-day validations with our ATP swabs. And then you have to actually use them. The more you use them, the more information you're going to get out of them. All right. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and it's a component of bacteria. If you have ATP on your surfaces aren't clean. Okay, so that's how we use them. All right, there are tests out there that swab for proteins, and you can do allergen testing. Most of you probably don't need to do that. If you do have allergen production, I would do your allergen production after you do your non-allergen production. So segregate it by time rather than trying to clean your allergens out in the middle of the workday. Okay, so next thing, the USDA is going to want to know how you are diluting your sanitizer. Okay, now I recognize I have this as a quad sanitizer. I actually wrote this a while back when we didn't know how bad quad sanitizers were, so I should probably change this to bleach or something. But they want to see your dilutions because they want to make sure you're diluting correctly. Go to the Grainger catalog, make sure you've got test strips, ask your chemicals supplier for test strips to know that you are diluting correctly. Okay, makes the USDA very, very happy. It's a very great way to verify your sanitation. Okay, your sanitation logs, and you have to write all of this stuff down and know that you are mixing it correctly. Always add acid to water. All right. Scheduled cleaning. You have to have a clean plant. And our scheduled cleaning is for everything else. And this is how you write it down. You can put it on a calendar. You can put it on a map. You know, I love for my clients to have maps of their facilities and write out everything in a room that isn't cleaned every day. So the drains are probably rinsed out every day, but probably not scrubbed every day. They're scrubbed every week. That's a great thing to put on a map because it's a visual clue for what people have to go and do. All right. So I want to drop a hint that doing that acid dilution, if you're carcass washing, and probably most of you are, you need to do the same thing for your carcass wash. All right. And so it's a good thing to train lots of people on how to do your dilutions correctly. All right. Preventive maintenance. You've got to check everything, even the outside, so that you know that your facility is where it's supposed to be. Be surprised at the number of times I'm like, where's that hole in the wall? I was in a ready-to-eat factory, and I found a spider on the floor in a pretty high-risk facility that was making ready-to-eat food. And they had recently changed out their camera system, and they hadn't plugged the holes, and the spiders were coming in through the holes. And of course, spiders carry salmonella, and that's bad. So write things down, fix them, and you got to, at the end of the day, you got to look at all of your equipment. I don't know how many times I go into production facilities and pull out rusty knives, folks. Just budget for new knives and pull them out when they're rusty. It's not worth the risk. All right, personal hygiene. This is an example of a personal hygiene program. My recommendation is that you go to where everybody washes their hands in the bathroom before they get into your facility. That water should be 110 degrees, so slightly warmer than your hands, within 10 seconds. Or people are not going to wash their hands well, because nobody likes washing their hands in cold water. They're not going to wash their hands well if they don't have soap and if they don't have paper towels. And as of SQF and BRC Edition 8, all sinks going into production rooms for production washing, so like not the bathroom sinks, have to be foot operated, okay? So, or non-hand controlled operated. So gone are the days where we turn on the spigot. All right, so there you go. Those are your common prerequisite programs. All right, of course, if you want help this, we are around. And what I want to do is I want to take a little bit more time. We're probably going to go over. If you need to come back to this, this is totally fine. But I want to wrap up our 5 pre-steps of HACCP, because you're way closer than you think, because we got a lot to cover. All right, so your 5 pre-steps of HACCP, and believe it or not, you've already done a lot of this. All right, so decision-making documentation. You guys have to know that the USDA wants to see your decision-making documentation. They want to know what you did and why. Write stuff down starting now. All right, here are your 12 steps of HACCP, and I promise you, we are going to get through all of this. I will be happy to recap the homework. Absolutely. All right, so what I want you guys to do is create your HACCP team. HACCP is a team sport, my friends. Somebody on the HACCP team should have an International HACCP Alliance certified HACCP training, so like the one that you're in. I like to have a whole bunch of different people on the HACCP team because it gets more of the plant involved in the conversation. If possible, I'd like to have marketing, I like to have finance, in addition to the QA people, the general manager, and if you can, your shipping clerk. Your shipping clerk is the eyes and ears of your plant. They know everything that comes in and everything that goes out. They're an amazing person to have on your HACCP team. And of course, I'm available to be on your HACCP team. And you got to keep your HACCP team trained. It's not enough for them to just go to this training, okay? Well, this training is certainly necessary. They got to be trained in a whole lot of different things, and it doesn't all have to be super formal training. All right, define your product. Guess what you did last time? You defined your product. That's what the specifications are for. All the ingredients, all the packaging. All right, name your suppliers here as well. Okay, that is step 2 of writing a HACCP plan. Step 3, you got to describe your intended user. Your intended user is the person who eats the food. It is not your distributor. All right, your distributor is a point to the intended user, but it is not your intended user. You have to understand how they buy your product, how they store your product, and how they actually eat it. And the case that happened around this was Nestle Toll House cookies. And remember in the 90s, well, for those of us who are old enough to remember in the 90s, they started selling these logs of chocolate chip cookie dough. And what did people do? They went to the grocery store and they bought it, and they went to the video store and they got a movie, and they sat down and they dug in, and they all got salmonella, and there was a class action lawsuit, and Nestle lost. Because Nestle knew that people ate chocolate chip cookie dough raw, and then after that, they had to prepare it as if it was a ready-to-eat food. Okay, so there you go. So that. You just got to know how your customers are consuming your food. Process flow diagramming. All right, this is part of your homework. You must write me a process flow diagram. All processes are theme and variations on receive stuff, store stuff, process stuff, package and label stuff, put it in finished product storage, and get rid of it. Okay? You're going to have rework, you're going to have other work in process storage, all of that sort of stuff, but you have to get this right. Okay? Receive stuff, store stuff, package and label it, put it in finished product storage, and distribute it. If you don't get your process flow diagram correct, nothing else is going to work with this, because your whole hazard analysis is predicated on your process flow diagram. Okay? So send us your process flow diagrams, all right? Because that's how we know that your hazard analysis is correct, just as a preview for your next step of homework for next week. All right? And then finally, you have to verify your process flow diagram. And my recommendation for this is get somebody who has no idea what your process flow is and ask them if that's how you make your food. Okay, buy your accountant a 6-pack of beer and say, can you come to the plant for an hour and walk the process with me? Okay, and if he or she says, yeah, no, that really is how you do it, you both sign off on the process flow diagram. All right, and you got to look at that every year. And you got to look at that if you implement new equipment. So you're getting a new grinder, you're getting a different kind of grinder, you're getting a slicer or a tray pack machine, update your decision-making documentation and your process flow diagram and re-sign it in, and make sure you don't have to update your HACCP. Okay, so you're going to, most of the time we do verify the process flow diagram as the culmination of these first 5 steps of HACCP, and then we go on to the hazard analysis. I have done so many third-party audits where I go in and I look at their process flow diagram, and it bears a pretty passing resemblance to what actually happens, but then the process flow diagram isn't accurately reflected in the HACCP plan, and that's a problem. Okay, so that's what you're going for. All right, so here's homework. For those of you who are here individually, that's what you have to do, okay? I'm not assigning products, so pick a product and do the process. Write to me and tell me, so your first piece of homework was write to me and tell me who you are and what you're doing in the class and your hopes and dreams. Your second piece of homework is to name out your HACCP team, all right? Tell me what food you're working with, who your intended user is, and do your process flow diagram. If you are in a team from a company, you guys can do this all together, or you can send them individually. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it gets done. Okay, so you have HACCP documentation that you got emailed as a zip file. If you don't know where that is, it is also, I also uploaded it to the membership site. So when you enrolled or were enrolled in the class by us, you got to log into the Meat and Poultry HACCP membership site. It's under the resources tab over there. All right, there you go. So that's your homework that we need to hear, that we need to get from everybody. It's been delightful having you here. We have now made it through almost halfway through the process, and so we are covering this in really, really good time. I'm super proud of you, and I'd love to hear from you. Send us your homework. Yes, so we write. Okay, answering questions. Write an SOP, write a flow diagram, tell me, go to that HACCP general documentation. All right, go to HACCP general documentation, okay, and name out, like, just go through the steps in that HACCP general documentation, which is your food safety team and your intended user and all that good sort of stuff. Okay. And the specifications log, you don't have to submit to us your specifications log itself. That is bonus for you guys to work on, but you do have to tell us in good enough detail what you are actually making. Okay, I find the easiest way to do that is through a spec log. And the answer is no. I would not like you to describe all the processes for a whole plant unless you're doing your homework separately. Okay, so if you're all in one plant, please do not send me 5 identical process flow diagrams for ground beef. Okay, work on them together, submit them together, it's totally fine. If you want to use this as a way to verify your process flow diagramming, because you already have a HACCP in place for multiple products, I would assign multiple products to people and use this as a way to verify use this homework as a way to verify that you're doing what you said you were going to do, and submit 5 different ones or however many of y'all are here. Okay, so there you go. We are here if you have questions. Y'all are amazing, and have a great day. Thanks everybody. Bye.